You were never meant to hear this. In 1798, 17 travelers vanished without a trace in Kentucky. Their horses found grazing, saddlebags untouched, no bodies, no screams. Just silence in a sealed set of documents buried for 200 years by men who feared what they had uncovered. What you're about to hear is not folklore, it's not legend. It's a suppressed truth so dangerous the state of Kentucky nearly erased it from existence. Because if the official records are accurate, Tand, they are then a single frontier. Family ran a fully operational killing ground under the mask of Christian charity for 8 long years. The Hardens weren't criminals, they were church. Leaders, healers, school teachers, the kind of people settlers prayed to find in a savage land. But what they built on their 400-acre farm wasn't a haven, it was a slaughterhouse. And what's worse? Everyone loved them for it. This is the descent. You don't climb out once you've heard this. You don't unknow the truth. If you're still here, understand this is forbidden knowledge. The kind that doesn't just change what you know. It changes who you are. The wilderness road carved through Cumberland Gap was supposed to be the trail to salvation. But to pass near Millfield was to step into something older, darker, something that still haunts that land today. The Hardens knew exactly who to target. Those traveling alone, those with no family nearby, those who wouldn't be missed. When they welcomed you with fresh bread and warm beds, they were already deciding how to kill you, how to dispose of what was left. We're not talking about chaos or rage. This was methodical, strategic, a system designed to convert compassion into cover. Because the frontier, like all frontiers, is where rules dissolve in monsters wear the faces of saints. Over the next 9 sections, you're going to hear details no historian will publish, patterns no lawman was allowed to investigate. You'll understand why the truth didn't come out until a single, forgotten clerk stumbled upon the wrong set of papers in 1987. This isn't just history. It's the anatomy of deception. It's the religion of control. And it starts with the family America was never supposed to remember. There are places where the earth remembers, places where the soil grows rich, not from rain or sun, but from blood. The Harden farm was one of those places. 3 miles south of Millfield, nestled along the bend of Beaver Creek. The land looked like a promise. Fertile, quiet, blessed. And for a time, that's exactly what it was, or so the town believed. The house stood tall, 2 stories high, with stone chimneys and imported glass windows, a luxury in 1798. Inside china, silver, books from Europe. No one asked how a frontier preacher and his wife could afford it, because the lie was more comforting than the truth. Ezekiel Harden stood 6'3", built like a blacksmith, voice like thunder. He didn't need a pulpit to command a crowd. Men followed him. Women trusted him. Children adored him. He quoted scripture with a kind of certainty that made doubt feel like sin. But behind the fire and brimstone, he ran a business. One measured in meat, not cattle, not swine. Flesh, Temperance Harden was smaller, gentle. Her hands never stopped, working. She was the town's healer, delivering babies by lantern light, curing infections with herbs no doctor understood. She said God had given her the gift. No one ever questioned where she learned to stitch wounds cleaner than a Boston surgeon, or why she kept surgical saws in a locked cabinet near the cellar. Together, Ezekiel and Temperance were more than respected. They were revered. They didn't just live in Millfield, they owned it, spiritually, psychologically. And the community gave them everything in return: privacy, praise, and power. But it was their children who perfected the illusion. Caleb, the strong and kind eldest son. Josiah, the bookish helper and winter schoolmaster. Mercy, the innocent beauty with the perfect smile. They all 3 raised in the performance of piety. All 3 complicit in a ritual that would bury nearly 24 travelers by spring. The Harden guest ledger told one story list of names, dates, polite comments of thanks, but the truth hid in the margins. Scratched initials, circled dates, subtle code that only the family understood. a code that told them when someone was ripe for disappearance. Some came seeking help. Some brought coin for medicine. Some just asked for a place to rest. All of them trusted the Hardens. That was their first and final mistake. Because the farm didn't just feed the family, fed the darkness beneath them. The killings didn't begin as murder. That's what made them so effective. At first, it was framed as mercy or survival. Wounded traveler, half dead from exposure, unable to continue his journey, Temperance administered her tinctures. Caleb carried him to the root cellar to recover. And when the man died overnight, Ezekiel led a solemn funeral prayer before burying the body near the creek. But then it happened again. A pregnant woman collapsed at their door, her husband frantic. Shouting for help, Temperance delivered the child. But something went wrong. The mother died, or so they said. The baby was buried, or so they said. The father was never seen again. Every death had a story, a reason, an explanation. And each one made Ezekiel's voice ring louder from the pulpit, warning of a world filled with evil, of travelers cursed by sin, of the Lord's mysterious ways. But by 1797, mercy had become method. The line had been crossed and then erased. Here's what the court record sealed until 1987 suggests. The Harden farm operated like a machine. Travelers were watched as they approached Millfield. Josiah kept detailed notes. He logged their supplies, weapons, and physical conditions. Caleb, with his easy smile and brute strength, invited them in. Mercy kept them calm. Temperance offered tea, and within hours most were drugged. The herbs in Temperance's apothecary weren't just for healing. Some induced sleep, others caused paralysis. One root belladonna produced visions and confusion. Ezekiel believed it was not just effective, it was divine. The Lord clouds the eyes of the wicked, he once wrote in the margins of his Bible. But the truth was far more profane. Once subdued, travelers were stripped of valuables, but not in haste. The Hardens weren't thieves, they were investors. They melted coins, sold horses under new names, reused clothing, bartered tools with. Nearby farms, slowly, carefully, everything filtered through a network of allies who never asked questions. And the bodies, they were never left whole. Some were burned in the new smokehouse, its oversized chimney designed to draw fast and leave no smell. Others were buried beneath fresh rows of tobacco or corn, plowed deep by Caleb's steady hands. But several, according to a hidden page found in the cellar ledger, were used. The meat was smoked, the bones crushed for lye, and some of the preserved cuts were sold in Lexington under the label salted pork. This wasn't madness, it was enterprise. A closed-loop economy of death, built on desperation, charity, silence. Because the Hardens didn't kill in rage, they killed in perfect, calculated peace. It was the silence that made them untouchable. You must understand the frontier morality, bent under the weight of survival. The law was distant. God was interpreted. Fear. Fear was currency. In Millfield, the Hardens held all three. Constable Jacob Winters wasn't a naive man. He'd fought in campaigns that turned boys into corpses. He'd seen what men did when no one was watching. But nothing prepared him for what he felt at the edge of the Harden property. Not dread, not suspicion, reverence. As if the land itself warned him to tread lightly or not at all. After Samuel Fletcher's disappearance, Winters followed procedure. He interviewed the family, walked the grounds, filed a report. But everything was too clean. The smokehouse bricks still warm. The cellar locked with new iron bolts. The air faintly sweet, like burnt syrup and old meat. He wrote it off, because he had to. But then it kept happening. Every few weeks, another traveler vanished. Always near Millfield. Always after speaking to someone connected to the Harden farm. The victims weren't drunks or criminals. They were merchants, teachers, families, people with plans, people with maps, and still no bodies. No blood. Just missing persons and nervous glances in church pews. Winters began returning to the farm under pretense: a missing mule, a neighbor's complaint. Minor things. But each time he returned, something had changed. The barn's shifted layout. The cellar grew deeper. New fences. New locks. Mercy's eyes grew darker. Caleb stopped speaking altogether. And Temperance, the ever-busy healer, began carrying a knife tucked in her apron. He wasn't the only one who noticed. Dr. Marcus Cromwell, a physician from Virginia passing through, stopped in Millfield to resupply. He stayed at the Hardin farm. One night, he never made it to his next destination. But before leaving, he spoke to Winters. Told him about the tea. About the tremor in his fingers after just one sip. About the cellar door with fresh blood dried in the grain. Winters requested a search warrant. It was denied. He returned with militia. They were turned back. Why? Because Ezekiel had influence. Reverends, merchants, even lawmakers owed him favors. Baptized their children, he buried their dead. Doctored their wounds when no one else would ride in the rain. And when whispers began to rise, Ezekiel turned to the pulpit. With eyes like burning coal, he warned of Satan's trickery, of accusers planted by sin, of false witnesses sent to destroy God's work. The townspeople listened and believed. Because in Millfield, faith was more powerful than fear, much more dangerous. The mask of normalcy, Emma's chilling duality on the surface. Emma Richter was every bit the ideal daughter. Posture was perfect. Her manners were flawless. She greeted every adult with grace, helped her mother with chores, and never once spoke out of turn. But behind those porcelain blue eyes, there was something else. Something that watched, something that learned. The neighbors said she rarely blinked. Children said she never smiled with her eyes. Her siblings whispered at night that sometimes Emma would just stand by their beds. For hours, silent, breathing. Emma's father, already cracking under the weight of what he'd seen that night in the barn, began keeping a journal. The entries grew more unhinged with each passing week. She mimics us. Perfectly, but that is not my daughter. He wrote that in February of 1874, and by March, he began locking his door at night. Not the front door, the door inside the house. The one that separated his bedroom from the hallway where Emma roamed, where she waited. Witnesses said Emma's voice changed around this time, not in pitch, but in cadence. Her speech was deliberate, too exact, like a recitation she didn't fully understand. She repeated phrases back to people with unnatural timing. "You look tired, Emma." Pause. "You look tired too, Mother." But always without emotion, as if copying, as if studying. And then came the incident at the church. Emma was caught standing alone in the basement, lights off, standing in the dark. When asked what she was doing, she replied, "I wanted to know how silence feels when God isn't watching." That line, "when God isn't watching," was recorded in a police report. Because later that week, a local boy disappeared, and Emma was seen last talking to him near the woods, holding his hand, smiling, but only with her mouth. The disappearance nobody wanted to investigate after the boy vanished. Things in the town began to shift. Not dramatically. Not the way you'd expect when a child goes missing, but subtly. Strangely, the local pastor stopped talking about the case during sermons. The sheriff closed the investigation within days, citing lack of evidence. Parents whispered behind closed doors, but no one confronted the Richter family. It was as if everyone had silently agreed that Emma was not to be disturbed. Her teacher, Miss Alcott, resigned unexpectedly after claiming Emma had drawn disturbing pictures during arithmetic class, scenes of people drowning in wells, of bones arranged like altars. When asked to explain, Emma said only, "They're not drawings, they're instructions." That same day, Miss Alcott packed her things and left town. She never returned. More peculiar was the way animals behaved around Emma. Dogs would cower, horses refused to let her ride, even birds avoided the sky above the Richter farm. One neighbor claimed he saw Emma standing in the middle of the field during a lightning storm, arms outstretched, speaking in a language he didn't recognize. When he called out to her, she didn't flinch, didn't turn, just kept whispering, "Into the rain." The family's farmhands started quitting one by one. They said they heard scratching beneath the floorboards of the barn, but only when Emma was near. One of them, a war veteran named Calvin, refused to take his final paycheck. He simply walked away down the road, barefoot, muttering, "That girl ain't right. That girl ain't human." The most chilling account came from Emma's younger brother, Jacob. He confessed in a letter never sent that Emma would sometimes speak to him at night in their dead grandmother's voice, not just imitating her, but replicating her tone, her breath, even her laugh. He said it felt like their grandmother was in the room, but trapped inside Emma. That letter was found years later, hidden beneath the floorboards, sealed with a single word on the envelope, "The return of the boy," but not as he was 7 months after he vanished. The boy came back, or rather something that looked like him did. He appeared at the edge of town, just after sundown, barefoot, eyes wide, clothes untouched by time or dirt. His mother collapsed at the sight of him. The townsfolk were stunned, but not with joy. There was no reunion, no weeping celebration, it's only silence. Everyone felt it. Something wasn't right. Da-da-da. Boy spoke little.
At.
When he did, his voice was different, too calm, too precise. He didn't remember his name, his family, or where he'd been, but he could recite full passages from obscure books he'd never read. He spoke of places that didn't exist on any map, the Mirror Valleys and the Iron Cathedral beneath the earth. The doctor who examined him said his heartbeat was irregular, not weak, but mechanical. Emma refused to see him. She told her mother, "That's not him. That's something else wearing his face." When asked what she meant, she went silent, then added, "I sent him away, but I didn't say he couldn't come back." Strange events escalated. The Richter's livestock were found mutilated. No blood, no tracks, just clean, surgical openings, as if carved with heat instead of blades. The town's water turned black for 2 days. Fish floated to the surface. And in the church tower, the bell rang continuously for 9 hours. No one inside, no mechanism running. The boy, or the thing pretending to be him, began visiting. Homes uninvited, he would simply appear at people's windows and stare, sometimes all night. People began to speak of dreams, shared dreams. Always the same. A stone room with no doors, and a voice behind them whispering their true names. Not the ones given at birth. The real ones. Eventually, the boy was found at the edge of the Richter property, standing perfectly still. Eyes rolled white, whispering to something buried in the soil. Witnesses say Emma walked up to him, placed her hand on his chest, spoke one word. The voice from the wall, the year was 1873. The Richter home stood in silence. No voices, no screams. Only the occasional creak of floorboards expanding in. The night, but then neighbors began to whisper. They claimed they heard. Singing, soft, feminine, melancholy, coming not from the windows, but from within the walls themselves. It began at 2:17 a.m. sharp. Every night, the exact same time. A low hum would ripple through the plaster. Emma's lullaby, the very same tune she used to sing at the orphanage. But Emma had been gone for years, buried, forgotten, and yet the song returned like a ritual, unchanging, unshaken, and always in her voice. Desperate for answers, her parents tore open the bedroom wall. Behind the wallpaper, behind the brick, they found something they could not explain. A cavity filled with human teeth, baby teeth. Hundreds of them, arranged in the shape of a spiral. At the center, a crude porcelain doll with Emma's name carved into its chest. Experts were summoned, doctors, priests, even mediums. None could explain how the singing continued after the wall was sealed again, nor why the doll's eyes, painted in blue, began turning black. One doctor, Samuel Hallen, dared to spend a night in that room. He brought with him a journal and a loaded pistol. By morning, he was gone. Only his journal remained. The last entry, was a single sentence, scrawled with shaking hands. She's inside the house now, not the walls. But how could that be? Emma was no longer flesh, no longer buried, not even dust. And yet, her voice traveled through matter, through memory, through time. Who or what had they brought into their home? And more importantly, was it ever Emma to begin with? The forbidden archive. After the events in the house, the Richter family fled. They left behind everything: furniture, photos, even Emma's childhood toys. The home was boarded shut, condemned by local authorities. But it didn't stay forgotten. In 1891, nearly 20 years later, a government-funded project called the Psyche Anomaly Cataloging Bureau quietly reopened the case. Led by Dr. Elias Branteman, later removed from public record, the Bureau infiltrated the ruins of the Richter house. They weren't looking for ghosts. They were looking for evidence, patterns, triggers, some kind of mathematical or psychic residue left behind by whatever had inhabited Emma. What they discovered was so disturbing that all findings were immediately classified. Sealed in a vault known only as Room IV-97, a place where the government stores phenomena that challenge not only science but reality itself. Whispers from former staff describe film reels showing Emma speaking fluent Akkadian in extinct Mesopotamian language she could never have known. Others mention a series of black and white photographs where Emma appears to age in reverse, becoming younger in each frame until she's nothing but a blur of light and shadow. Most damning of all, a memo from Dr. Brandt stating, "The entity is not unique. There are others. It follows patterns tied to lunar cycles and early childhood trauma. It feeds on forgetting." The Bureau's conclusion: Emma wasn't haunted. She was transformed, changed into something ancient, something that had worn many names across history, something that chose children because their minds are most susceptible to bending the laws of what we call possible. Today, Room IV-97 remains inaccessible, guarded, denied, and erased from the public domain. But if the Bureau's records are true, one terrifying truth remains: Emma was just the beginning. The final revelation, and now we come to the final, most chilling detail. In 1933, nearly 60 years after Emma Richter vanished, a man named Father Anselm Drulard, a defrocked priest turned psychiatric researcher, submitted a private letter. To the Bureau, it was never meant for public eyes. The letter contained no theories, no data, no summaries, just one sentence: she came back. The return didn't happen in Massachusetts. It happened 2,400 miles away in a remote part of Oregon. A child unnamed in the censored files was discovered deep in the Cascade Forest, barefoot and alone. Her eyes were described as like mirrors filled with static. Her blood type didn't register. Her fingerprints shifted patterns every 72 hours. And in her possession was a single item, a porcelain doll engraved with the initials ER. The child claimed she didn't know her name, but she did know one thing. Over and over, she whispered, "I dreamed I was a girl named Emma, but they cut me open to let the light out." Within 48 hours, the child was transferred to an unknown location by men in gray uniforms. No record exists of her after that, so ask yourself this: was Emma Richter the host of something ancient and migratory? Did she survive by transcending the boundaries of identity, of body, even of time? Or was she simply a signal, a message embedded in the timeline, meant to warn those of us who still cling to logic? Because cases like this have not stopped. In fact, they've increased. Different names, different towns, same signs. And if you listen very carefully, especially on nights when the moon hangs too low, too red, you might still hear it. The sound of static, the humming of light, and a child's voice trapped between worlds saying, "They made me forget, but I remember now. This is not a ghost story. This is a blueprint. A system designed to unmake your reality one child at a time." And the worst part? It's still happening.